I'm 36 years old, and for most of my adult life, I've been known as that guy who married up. My name's Nate, and for the past 10 years, my wife's family never let me forget it. To be clear, I didn't come from money. I grew up in a small town, raised by a single mom who worked two jobs and still found time to bring me sandwiches on her lunch break. College wasn't an option right out of high school, so I joined the military, served 4 years, and then worked construction, side hustled in IT, and eventually started a small software business out of a garage apartment I rented behind a bowling alley. So no, I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. But I've always worked. When I met Emily, my wife, we were both 26. She was finishing her MBA, and I was just starting to land mid-sized contracts with small businesses for a little inventory app one coded in my spare time. She never seemed to care about money. She liked that I read before bed, that I cooked my own meals, that I walked dogs on weekends to make extra cash. I thought that was enough. I thought her family would see what she saw. But from the first handshake with her father, I knew exactly where I stood. I remember the first dinner I had with them, some high-end steakhouse downtown. Her dad ordered for me without asking, told the waiter, he'll take the sirloin, medium. It's the safest bet. Her mom smiled politely, barely made eye contact. And her uncle Mark, the one who always wore cufflinks that probably cost more than my car, just smirked and said, "So what charity helped you crawl your way up to Emily?" That was the first time I heard it, charity case. It wouldn't be the last. Over the years, it became their family joke. At holidays, her cousins would hand me empty envelopes and say, "Oops, we forgot you're the one who gets gifts, not gives them." Her aunt once asked if I'd like to borrow her husband's tux for our anniversary dinner, so you won't look like the valet. They always laughed like it was harmless, but each little jab chipped away at something inside me. Emily would roll her eyes and say, "Ignore them. They're snobs." But she never said it to them. She never told them to stop. Still, I loved her. So I bit my tongue. I smiled through dinners, toasted champagne at their lake house, and played nice at every charity gala they invited me to as their plus one. I stayed out of the way and kept building my business quietly and steadily through long nights and silent weekends. Then came the pandemic, and everything changed. I won't bore you with the details, but my app pivoted fast. Inventory management became essential when supply chains collapsed. Small businesses needed exactly what I'd been refining for 5 years. Contracts exploded. A logistics firm bought a 40% stake. Suddenly, I wasn't just doing well. I was in the features in Forbes bracket. And for the first time in my life, the calls I got weren't people asking for favors. They were offering deals. You'd think that would change something. That maybe Emily's family would finally treat me like more than some lucky stray she'd adopted. Nope. Instead, the tone shifted from mockery to something worse, entitlement. I noticed it first with Uncle Mark. He cornered me at Thanksgiving, asked if I'd be interested in a friendly investment into his boutique real estate firm. I declined politely. 2 weeks later, he sent me a formal proposal with a six-figure minimum and a preferred family return rate. I ignored it. Her father invited me to lunch, just us. That had never happened before. He handed me a manila folder mid-meal and said, "This is a joint venture opportunity. Family exclusive. No banks. Just blood." I stared at the numbers and said I'd think about it. I never got back to him. And then came Christmas. They rented out a luxury cabin in Aspen. I wasn't invited. Emily was. She went. "It's just easier," she told me. "They'll behave better if it's just me." That stung more than anything they'd ever said. While she was gone, I reviewed our finances. The prenup we signed 10 years ago was solid, airtight, really. Emily had insisted on it at the time. Her dad's lawyer had drafted it, not mine. I didn't even blink back then. Of course I'd signed it. I had nothing to lose. No? That document was the only thing standing between my life and their claws. I started noticing strange things after that. Emily became distant, not cold, but different, asking more about my assets, wondering if we should consider combining accounts for tax purposes. Her lawyer friend Lisa invited us to brunch one weekend and casually asked if we'd ever considered updating our marital agreement, now that things had shifted. Shifted. That word echoed in my head. Then came the dinner. Emily asked if I'd be open to having her family over, just a small gathering. She said they wanted to make peace, to reconnect. I didn't buy it, but I agreed. I hosted, hired a private chef, set the long dining table, put my best wine on the counter. I even put out fresh flowers. They all arrived, dressed to the nines. Her dad handed me a bottle of champagne I recognized from Costco. Her uncle brought a briefcase. Emily looked anxious. We sat. We toasted. Small talk flowed like syrup, slow and forced. Then Uncle Mark cleared his throat and pulled the briefcase onto the table. Well, he said, adjusting his cuffs. There's something we'd like to discuss tonight. Something overdue. Her dad nodded. We know things have evolved. And we all think it's time we revisit some of the old paperwork. What's past is past, but let's talk future. Then Mark opened the briefcase and slid out a manila folder. I looked at Emily. She stared down at her lap. Inside the folder, a proposed amendment to our prenup, a dissolution clause, a redistribution agreement. In short, they wanted me to void it. Her mom chimed in. Your family, Nate. Truly. And family protects each other. But it's not right that everything stays so separate. Then Uncle Mark smiled like a snake and said, You've done well. Let's be honest, we all underestimated you. But this is a chance to show your gratitude, to prove you belong. I sat there, my heart thudding behind my ribs, watching their smug faces, watching Emily say nothing. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't push the folder back. Instead, I reached under the table, unzipped my leather bag, and laid a single envelope on the polished wood. Everyone stopped talking. Even the chef froze in the doorway. That envelope had one item inside. I looked at Uncle Mark and said, You brought a lawyer. That's smart, because what I'm about to say is going to need one. And that's when I opened the envelope. Inside the envelope was a certified copy of the original prenup, complete with notarized signatures, timestamps, and, most importantly, a clause most of them had either forgotten or never read. I slid it across the table toward Mark and tapped a paragraph I had highlighted. Clause 7.5, I said, calmly. In the event of an attempted renegotiation of this agreement by any third party, including but not limited to immediate or extended family, the signer reserves the right to impose a legal freeze on all shared marital assets pending a full investigation into coercion. Mark blinked. Emily's father reached for the paper with shaking hands. And since we're speaking openly tonight, I continued, locking eyes with Emily, I've already hired my own legal team. You remember Tony Hargrove, right? The guy you all said would never return a nobody's call? He's representing me now. He reviewed this clause last week. His advice? Document everything. The silence was thick. I stood slowly, walked to the bar cart, and poured myself a drink with a steady hand. I also have emails. From your dad. From Lisa. From you, I said, looking directly at Emily now. Her eyes widened. Asking for asset consolidation. Suggesting account mergers. Casual suggestions, just innocent enough. But when you put them in order, they paint a picture. Emily finally spoke. Nate, it wasn't like that. I nodded slowly. Then why didn't you tell me they were planning this? Why didn't you say anything when he opened the briefcase? Her mom cleared her throat, trying to salvage the moment. This doesn't have to be hostile. We're just talking. No, I said, you're not. You're cornering. I turned to Uncle Mark. I also know about your debt, $180,000 in back taxes, another $90,000 owed to vendors. Your boutique firm is circling the drain, and this little family reunion? This wasn't a dinner. This was a financial intervention. You're bleeding, and I was your band-aid. He bristled. You have no right. I raised my hand. You came into my home. You brought a lawyer. You handed me legal documents across my dinner table. You made it my right. Then I looked around the table, letting the silence stretch. For 10 years, I smiled through every insult. I laughed when you called me a charity case. I drove your drunk nephew home at midnight. I paid for the generator when the lake house lost power. I answered every favor with a yes. And I did it because I thought that's what family does. But I get it now. You never saw me as family. You saw me as an ATM with a heartbeat. Emily finally looked up. Nate, please, can we talk in private? I smiled, but there was no warmth behind it. We'll talk, but not here. Then I turned to the chef, who was still frozen in the doorway. Dinner's over. Please box everything to go. The guests, if you could still call them that, sat in stunned silence. Her mom opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Her dad was pale. Mark's face had turned a shade of crimson I didn't know was humanly possible. As I gathered my things, I added one last thing quietly, without anger, just certainty. I didn't get rich by being stupid. And I didn't stay quiet because I was weak. I stayed quiet because I believed you were worth the benefit of the doubt. But tonight, I finally ran out of benefit. And with that, I walked upstairs, leaving them with their paperwork, their boxed dinners, and a silence that had the weight of a closing vault. Emily didn't follow me. Not immediately. She sat there with them for a while. I could hear hushed voices through the vents. I didn't bother listening. I already knew how the night would end. But I wasn't done yet. Not even close. Because I still had one card left to play. About 20 minutes passed before I heard the soft knock on the bedroom door. Nate. Emily's voice was low. Not the usual calm, confident tone I knew. This was hesitant. Careful. I didn't answer right away. I let the silence do the work. When I finally opened the door, I didn't invite her in. I just stepped aside. She walked in slowly, glancing around like she wasn't sure if she belonged in her own house. Or maybe she was just seeing it differently now. This wasn't the place we'd built together anymore. It was the fortress she'd tried to breach, thinking I wouldn't notice. I sat down in the armchair near the window. She stayed standing. I didn't know they were going to do that, she said finally. The briefcase, the documents, that wasn't part of what we talked about. I asked, not angrily, just to see how she'd respond. She shifted. I mean me and my dad. He's been worried about. About what? I cut in. About losing access? About me keeping what I earned instead of handing it over like some grateful servant. She blinked hard, like I'd slapped her. It wasn't like that. No. I leaned forward. Because it sure felt like an ambush, Emily. You sat there while they tried to rewrite the agreement your own lawyer drafted. You didn't speak up. You didn't even flinch. I was trying to keep the peace. I laughed, but it was hollow. There's no peace in a hostage negotiation. Her face twisted, defensive now. You think I planned all this? That I want your money? I said slowly. You didn't think I'd ever stand up to you. That landed. I saw it in the way she went quiet, the way her shoulders sank. For a long time, neither of us spoke. When she finally did, it wasn't what I expected. Do you remember our second anniversary? She asked, softly. I nodded. The weekend in Charleston. You gave me that little wooden box with a note inside. Whatever we build, it's ours. Always ours. I still have it. I said nothing. That's who I married, she whispered. Not this version of you who treats everything like it's war. That stung more than it should have. Because the truth was, she wasn't entirely wrong. I had changed. I was different now. But it wasn't about the money. It was about the lies. You want the truth? I asked. She nodded, eyes glassy. I still love you, I said. But I don't trust you. Not after tonight. She looked down, like the floor might offer an escape. Then what happens now? I didn't answer. Because I didn't know. Not yet. What I did know was that her family was still downstairs, probably figuring out whether to spin this into a misunderstanding or retreat into silence, and hope the tension passed like a storm. But I had no intention of letting them reset the narrative. I'd spent a decade as their punchline. Tonight was just the beginning. And that's where the final piece came in. Before the dinner, I had scheduled something for the next morning. A quiet move, but a powerful one. Across town, in a sleek glass building downtown, a legal team was preparing a revised trust. One that would shift the entirety of my company's holdings and all personal assets into an irrevocable trust with two trustees, myself and an old friend they didn't even know existed. It was scheduled to go live at 10 a.m. And once it did, no one could touch what I'd built. Not Emily. Not her father. Not Mark and his sinking real estate circus. They could scream, threaten, guilt trip, all they wanted. It wouldn't matter. I had played the fool long enough. And now? Now I was ready to show them what a real plan looked like. Emily stayed in the room that night, but I didn't sleep beside her. I lay awake in the armchair, staring out the window as snow began to fall over the city. It was quiet, almost peaceful, but inside, I was somewhere between tired and alert, like the aftermath of a long storm where you're still expecting another wave to hit, even when you know the sky has already broken open. At 7:15 the next morning, I dressed, brewed a pot of coffee, and headed out before she could say much. I left her a note on the counter. It said, "We'll talk tonight. After I'm done." That was all. I didn't owe anyone long explanations anymore, not her, not her family. Downtown was silent at that hour. My attorney, Tom, a friend from my early tech days who'd gone into estate law, was already waiting with a binder on the table and 2 copies of the final documents. "Still want to go through with it?" he asked. "Yes." Even with her name left out completely? No contingencies? None. He paused. "You sure about the no revisions clause?" "This is final." You'd need both trustees to dissolve it. Not even you could override it alone. That's the point. Tom nodded and slid the papers across. I signed them. 1, 2, 3 signatures, then a firm press on the notary stamp. And just like that, everything changed. Every account I held, every equity share, every future dividend and acquisition, all of it now belonged to the structure we'd created, the Holt Trust. It couldn't be contested. It couldn't be amended without unanimous approval from both trustees, me and James McAdams, my former coding partner who'd walked away from the startup scene to become a Buddhist monk in Oregon. I'd called him 3 weeks ago, told him everything. He didn't ask for details. He just said, "You finally ready to stop bleeding for people who never brought you a Band-Aid? And then, I'll do it. But if they come crying, I'm not answering the door." Perfect. By noon, the trust had triggered its automatic redirection protocols. Shared accounts were split. Old credit cards were frozen and replaced. My will was rewritten and notarized. Emily had no idea yet, but she would by sunset. I drove home slowly. No music, just the hum of the engine. My phone vibrated once, Emily. I didn't answer. When I walked into the house, I could feel the tension like static in the air. She was pacing the kitchen, phone in hand, her face tight and pale. "They're freaking out," she said before I could speak. "My dad says you filed something. That there's a trust? That he's not authorized anymore on the tax planning docs." I nodded. "Correct. You did all that without telling me? Just like you sat at that table and watched them slide legal documents across the table toward me." "That wasn't me." "Stop," I said, holding up a hand. "Let's not insult each other." She stared at me, and for the first time in years, I saw the person I'd once fallen in love with begin to flicker behind her eyes. Not the polished woman who charmed rooms full of strangers. The one who used to laugh with her feet in a river, eating gas station snacks and talking about books she'd loved as a kid. But it flickered, and then it was gone. "Did you ever love me?" she asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. I took a long breath. "I still do. But I don't love the version of us that's become your family's project. They don't speak for me." "No," I said, gently. "But you let them." She sat down at the kitchen table, staring at the marble, tracing the veins in the stone with her finger like she was trying to follow a road that might lead somewhere else. "You didn't even give me a chance to fight for us." "I gave you 10 years," I said quietly. 10 years of holding my tongue, being their punching bag, funding their weekends, laughing off their cruelty while you told me it was just how they were. She looked up. "So what now? Are we done?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a second envelope, this one smaller. Inside was a printed email chain between me and a therapist, one I'd contacted months ago, before the trust, before the lawyer, when things still felt salvageable. The subject line was Marital Counseling Referral Inquiry. "I tried," I said, sliding it across the table. "I asked you to go. You said we didn't need it. I didn't know how bad it had gotten, because you didn't want to know." She opened the envelope. "Read a few lines." Then her hands trembled, just a bit. "I'm not trying to destroy you, Emily," I said. "This isn't revenge. This is protection. For me." She nodded, swallowing hard. "So what happens next?" I paused, then said it as simply as I could. "You'll stay here until the end of the month. I'll cover everything. After that, I'll move forward with a separation agreement. No claims, no counters. You'll have what you came into the marriage with, and nothing less. And if I don't agree, you signed the prenup. You helped write it. And now, even if you wanted to fight it, you'd be going up against a trust you legally can't touch." There was a long pause. She finally whispered, "They told me it wouldn't hold up." I nodded. "They were wrong. And if you'd asked me directly, I would have told you that." Her face crumpled. But I didn't go to her. I didn't reach out or soften my voice. I had nothing left to give her, not the kind she'd taken for granted. That night, I packed a bag and left. Not because I was angry, because I was done. I booked a room in a quiet hotel by the bay, overlooking the water. I turned my phone off, ordered a glass of wine, slept deeper than I had in years. A week passed. Then 2. Emily's lawyer reached out, confirmed she would sign the separation papers. No contest, no claims. She declined any alimony, said in her note that she wanted to keep what was left of her dignity. I respected that. When the final documents came through, I signed them without a second thought. I kept the house, the assets, the company. But more than that, I kept my peace. A month later, I moved out of the city. Not far, just enough. I bought a small place with tall windows and a garden that got the right kind of sunlight. Hired a golden retriever from a rescue shelter who thinks socks are chew toys and that every knock at the door means someone came just for him. I wake up early now. I cook again. I read at night. And sometimes, when I think back on the past 10 years, I don't feel bitterness. I feel clarity. Because sometimes the worst kind of poverty isn't financial, it's emotional. It's spending years being told you're only valuable for what you give, not who you are. And walking away from that? That's the richest thing I've ever done. I've always been the quiet one in the family, not the black sheep, not the golden child, just background noise. I'm Sam, 36, no wife, no kids, and apparently, in the eyes of my brother's family, no life. What I do have is a steady job in IT, no debt, and a bank account that's weathered more storms than any of them know. For years, I played the part they wrote for me. Show up at holidays, bring the expensive gifts, cover the forgotten bills, and be grateful for a seat at the table, even if it was wobbly and next to the coat rack. But nothing prepared me for what happened last weekend. It wasn't one big blow-up. It was a smirk, a sentence, and the sound of torn wrapping paper, and that was all it took to end everything. It started at my brother Mike's house. He'd invited the whole family over to celebrate an early Christmas since they were planning a vacation over the holidays. The kind of vacation I paid for last year when they had unexpected car trouble, even though Mike showed up to my house 3 days later in a brand new truck with a Bluetooth tailgate. I didn't say anything. I never do. That's part of the problem. I got there a little after noon. The driveway was packed, so I parked 2 streets over and walked. By the time I got inside, the living room was a disaster zone, wrapping paper everywhere, kids screaming over who got what, and my sister-in-law Carrie yelling at Alexa to play Mariah Carey again. I barely got a hi from anyone except Grandma Helen, who gave me the same squinty look she always does, like she's trying to remember if I'm the nephew who's divorced or the one who never bothered. Spoiler alert, I'm the second. I spotted the PS5 in the corner, the one I'd waited 6 weeks on a restock alert to find. It was gift-wrapped with silver foil and a black satin ribbon. Mike had texted me earlier, asking if I could swing by Best Buy and pick something up for his son, Tyler. I knew what that meant. He didn't offer to pay. He never does. But Tyler's 14, and like most teenagers, he lives in a world where everything is content and nothing is gratitude. I figured, fine, let the kid have one good memory with something I gave him. The second Tyler spotted the box with his name on it, he tore into it like a raccoon on garbage day. He didn't even read the card. Didn't look up. Just ripped the wrapping like it personally offended him. And then he saw what was inside. A PS5. Holy, he caught himself just in time, looked around for approval, and then grinned like he'd just found a gold bar. That would have been fine. I would have taken the lack of thanks and gone to refill my paper plate with soggy stuffing like I always do. But then he looked right at me and smirked. Dad says nobody would even care if you just vanished. The room got quiet for a split second. And then laughter. Not nervous laughter. Real laughter. The kind that sticks in your teeth. Mike howled. Carrie smacked the arm of the couch. Even Grandma snorted. Well, he's not wrong, Carrie said through a mouthful of cranberry sauce. You really should get a hobby or something, Sam. I didn't say a word. I just stood up. My heart wasn't racing, that would have made sense. Instead, it was that cold, hollow kind of silence in my chest. Like my body had decided I didn't need emotions anymore. I walked over to the dining table, took my phone out, and with a few swipes, froze every bank card tied to the family accounts. Mike's gym membership? Gone. Carrie's wine subscription? Canceled. The utilities bill I'd been auto-paying as a favor? Done. I opened the banking app, transferred the emergency fund Mike begged me to set up after his last layoff, the one in my name, but for the family's sake, directly to my personal savings. Froze it. Then I opened my Venmo, refunded the $600 I'd sent to Carrie last week for Christmas decorations, and wrote a single word in the comment. Nope. Still, I didn't say anything. I walked to the kitchen, grabbed the plain cardboard box I'd brought in earlier and left on the counter, the one nobody bothered to ask about, and set it right in the middle of the table. Tyler was too busy setting up his new console to notice. Mike was opening a beer. Carrie was scrolling through Instagram, probably looking for a filter to hide the empty wine bottles on the coffee table. I didn't wait for them to open it. I didn't tell them what was inside. I just walked out the front door, not slamming it, not storming out, just walking. Calm. Like I'd finished my shift. I didn't look back. Didn't wait to see who followed. Spoiler alert, no one did. It wasn't until 2 hours later, when I was already home, on my couch, eating leftover Chinese food and watching a documentary on octopuses, that my phone lit up. First, it was a text from Mike. What is this? Then another from Carrie. Very funny. Fix it. Then Tyler. Why would you do that? And then silence. Until one final message popped up, this time from Grandma Helen, which shocked me more than anything. All it said was, that was cruel. Even for you. I stared at the message, laughed once, and turned off my phone. But here's the thing, they still hadn't opened the box. Not then. Not yet. And inside that box was something they never expected. Something that would make them realize just how long I'd been the one holding all their lives together, and how fast it could all fall apart when I let go. I didn't plan it like some movie revenge scheme. There were no whiteboards, no timeline with red yarn. Just years of quiet resentment, slowly filing itself away into the corners of my mind. I never even knew I'd do something like this until I was already doing it. But once I walked out of that house, once the door closed behind me and my name was nothing but an echo, I realized something. I didn't feel guilty. Not one bit. They opened the box that evening. I know, because Mike called. He never calls. The voicemail was shaky, clipped. What is this supposed to mean? Sam, he snapped. You think this is funny? After everything I've done for you. I didn't respond, because I knew what he saw. Inside the box, I placed 8 envelopes, each one sealed, labeled with a name. No bows, no fancy paper. Just plain white business envelopes, like the kind you'd use to pay your water bill. Taped to the inside lid of the box was a sticky note. My handwriting, all caps. If I'm invisible, then so is my support. Good luck. The first envelope was for Mike. Inside, a printed PDF, an official notice of removal as co-signer from the family car loan. My name scratched out in thick red ink. Alongside it, a copy of a bank transfer showing I'd withdrawn every cent from the shared emergency account, the one he'd leaned on more times than he admitted. There was also a screen grab of his Amazon card. I had full access, and he'd left it logged in, including 3 items he'd been eyeing for himself, all still unpaid for. I clicked Cancel Order before printing it. Carrie's envelope was next. Hers contained copies of 2 bounced payments, one for the family phone plan, another for the internet bill. I had been paying both, every month, quietly. At the bottom of the stack was a service disconnected notice I had scheduled to go into effect 2 days from now. I gave her time. I'm not a monster. But she'd be streaming nothing on Netflix by Wednesday. Tyler's envelope was different. It wasn't about money. It was a photo, a printed screenshot from 3 months ago. Him texting a friend on Snapchat. My uncle's so pathetic, lol. Thinks buying me stuff makes him madder. I hadn't meant to see it. It popped up while I was helping him back up his phone during a crash. But I saved it. That screenshot sat in my phone for 3 months. I never showed anyone, never confronted him. But now, I printed it out, put it in an envelope, and wrote in Sharpie across the top, "Be careful who you mock while using their money." The 4th envelope was for Grandma Helen. Hers contained a thank you card, blank. I wanted to remind her what it looked like. I'd been sending her groceries on the 1st of every month for over a year through an Instacart subscription. I canceled it the moment I walked out. The next day, she'd be calling the store asking why her milk never came. My sister Rachel's envelope, she wasn't even at the gathering, but she was part of the rot. Her card simply read, "You once asked for $900 to help cover your wedding DJ. I paid it. You never invited me. Enjoy the silence." There were 2 more. One for my dad, one for my mom. They weren't there either. But they were complicit in other ways, in silence, in favoritism, in every shrugged shoulder and passive dig over the years. Dad's envelope had a printout of the vacation itinerary he was planning for June. A cruise. Paid, in full, by me as a surprise Father's Day gift. Cancelled. Mom's had something even worse. A photo of the nursing care consultation we'd done together 6 months ago, the one she cried during, terrified of being a burden, of becoming that old woman everyone avoids. I had found the perfect facility, paid the deposit, put her name on a wait list. I canceled that too. In her envelope, I tucked the confirmation email with a sticky note on top. Ask Mike if he'll help you pee when the time comes. That night, they didn't call again. Not one of them. But the silence didn't last. By the next morning, I had 15 unread texts. Most were angry. Carrie sent paragraphs, all caps, lots of emojis. Mike's were shorter, more venom. One simply said, "Wow, you really think you're better than us." Another, that PS5 is Tyler's. You don't get to punish a child. A child? That child told me the world wouldn't care if I vanished. And everyone laughed. For years, I gave, and they took. Like I was the family ATM with no PIN required. I told myself I was being kind. That it was noble to be generous without expecting thanks. That maybe someday, when they saw I was always there, they'd actually notice me. But they didn't. They noticed my money, my car, when they needed a ride, my name, when the credit applications came up. But not me. And now? Now they were noticing what life looked like without me. I didn't write back. I didn't explain myself. I just let it unfold. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Because something else was in that box. Something they hadn't seen yet. The eighth envelope. Labeled simply, Final. The eighth envelope had no name on it. Just one word, handwritten in black ink, clean across the front. Final. And I knew that's the one that would keep them up at night. I hadn't told them what it was. I didn't have to. They'd open it last. Everyone always saves the mystery for the end, right? It's human nature. Curiosity wrapped in fear. I imagined the scene in my head. Mike pacing the kitchen, muttering something about how I'd finally snapped. Carrie scrolling through legal forums, trying to see if she could report me for emotional abuse or financial sabotage. The irony. Tyler sulking in the corner, still clutching the PS5 controller like it was going to turn back into a pumpkin if he let go. And Grandma? Probably sipping lukewarm tea with that same judgmental scowl, rehearsing a speech about how family doesn't turn its back, even when ungrateful. And then someone would open it. Probably Mike. He never could resist being the loudest person in the room. Inside was a letter. It wasn't angry. It wasn't bitter. It was honest. Printed on thick paper, folded with precision, like a resignation letter. Which, in a way, it was. It began. If you're reading this, it means I finally did what I should have done years ago. I left. Not just the house. Not just Christmas. I left you. That first line was enough to punch through the silence, I'm sure. But I kept it going. I don't expect an apology. You don't have it in you. I've watched every one of you treat me like a background prop, a wallet, a taxi, a babysitter, a mistake you only acknowledge when it's convenient. You talk about family like it's sacred, but what you mean is useful. And I'm not useful anymore. Not in the way you want. I hadn't written this out of revenge. Not really. It was clarity. The kind you only get after years of swallowing your pride and calling it peacekeeping. The letter continued. Do you remember who paid the deposit when Tyler broke the neighbor's window and you wanted to avoid police involvement? Or who pretended not to notice that loan you never paid back? Or who drove 3 hours to fix your internet because you didn't want to pay a technician? I do. I remember everything. Because I kept the receipts, literally. You said no one would care if I vanished. That's when it clicked. You already think I have. You treat me like I'm invisible, disposable. So now, I'm doing you a favor. I'm disappearing. No more money. No more favors. No more being the family's silent safety net. And the last paragraph, that's the one I knew would stick. That's the one they'd read out loud, maybe even twice. You can keep the PS5. You can keep the gifts, the time, the memories I was foolish enough to think mattered. But from this point on, I'm no longer part of your family. Don't call. Don't text. Don't apologize. This isn't a negotiation. It's a notice. I hope someday you realize what you had. I really do. But by then, I'll be long gone. And you'll be opening a lot more empty boxes with nothing inside but your own echoes. That was it. No threats. No ultimatums. Just a clean, surgical goodbye. And then I signed it, Sam. I imagined Mike holding the paper like it might catch fire. Carrie scoffing, pretending to be unbothered while she blinked too much. Tyler trying to act cool, but glancing nervously toward his father for a cue. And Grandma? I imagined her going very still, because she's old enough to know when someone really means they're done. They didn't know yet where I'd gone. They didn't know I'd already packed a suitcase. Booked a cabin up north, by the lake where Dad used to take us before he got bitter and bored. I had no plans to come back. I was renting it for 2 months, maybe more. A little place with no Wi-Fi, no cell service, and most importantly, no family obligations. I didn't even tell Rachel, because even she had laughed when they handed me that scratch-off for my birthday and said, well, if he wins, we'll finally get that pool. I thought I'd feel empty, regretful, alone. But instead, I felt like I could finally breathe. And somewhere, hours away, in that too big house stuffed with holiday garbage and fake smiles, I knew the silence was settling in like frost. They were realizing, maybe for the first time, that I'd been the glue. And now they were cracking. I didn't hear from them for 3 days. Not a text. Not a call. Not even a fake apology typed with one hand and regret with the other. Just complete, suffocating silence. And I enjoyed every minute of it. The cabin I'd rented was small but perfect. One bedroom. A kitchen with wood cabinets that creaked like they were telling stories. A fireplace that took some coaxing but roared beautifully once it got going. No internet, no TV, and the only signal I had was the crackle of the radio and the crunch of snow under my boots during morning walks. I wasn't hiding. I was healing. That silence? It wasn't loneliness. It was peace. The kind of peace you don't realize you've been missing until it's so loud and pure, you start to wonder how you ever lived without it. On the fourth day, the messages started again. Mike's name popped up first. The preview read, "You're being childish. Can we talk?" Then another. "Carrie's freaking out. We need to fix this. You're part of the family." Oh, yes. Now I was part of the family. I didn't respond. Then came Carrie, 5 minutes later. "Whatever this is, it's gone way too far. You embarrassed us. Tyler's been crying all day." That one made me chuckle. Because Tyler didn't cry when he told me no one would care if I vanished. He smirked. And everyone laughed. No apology. No accountability. Just discomfort at the fallout. That's what really got to them. Not that I'd been hurt, but that I'd stopped letting them benefit from hurting me. I waited another day. Then Rachel texted. The sister who hadn't even shown up. I heard what happened. I know they went too far, but ghosting everyone isn't healthy either. Can we meet up? Ghosting? Ghosting? I'd spent a decade being ghosted at family dinners. Ignored. Overlooked. Ridiculed quietly in corners like I couldn't hear the whispers. This wasn't ghosting. This was grieving, not for them, but for the person I used to let them turn me into. I didn't reply to her either. Instead, I went for a walk. Through the thick snow and bare trees, past the frozen lake, through the woods where silence wasn't awkward, it was earned. I stood there for an hour, breathing it in. And then I made a decision. Not out of spite. Not out of rage. Out of clarity. It was time to close the book. When I returned to the cabin, I sat at the little kitchen table, poured a cup of stale cabin coffee, and began typing. Not on a phone. On paper. Real, old-fashioned, pen-to-paper letters. The kind no one writes anymore, which felt fitting, because none of them had written me anything in years that didn't involve a Venmo request or a list of things they wanted me to pick up. The first letter was to Mike. "Mike, you said I was being childish. I want to thank you for that. Because for once, I'm actually thinking like a child, one that finally understands what love should look like. It's not measured by the number of favors done or the bills paid. It's measured by laughter that doesn't sting, by words that don't break you. You taught Tyler to mock me, not by sitting him down and saying it outright, but by laughing when he did. That taught him more than any lecture could. You didn't just fail me. You failed him, too. Because you taught him that kindness is weakness and that people are only worth what they can give. I won't be part of that lesson anymore." Then Carrie. "Carrie, you always acted like I was some pathetic joke Mike brought along. You never said it, but your tone said enough. I remember every look, every sarcastic, 'Wow, you actually came,' or 'Must be nice to afford that when you don't have kids.' But here's the thing, I did not have kids because I couldn't. I chose not to. I watched how you treated the people who showed up for you and decided that being alone was better than being used. You said Tyler cried. Did you? Or are you just panicking now that your credit card isn't going through and no one's paying your streaming services?" To Rachel, I kept it short. "Rachel, we both know you've always done what's easiest. Staying quiet was easier than standing up. Not inviting me to your wedding was easier than explaining to your husband why your family treats me like a coat rack. I'm not mad anymore. I just have no more energy to explain myself to people who only notice I exist when they need help moving a couch. Even Grandma Helen got one. Grandma, you once told me that being quiet was a virtue, that I should be grateful no one asks much of me. You said I had it easy. What you never understood is that silence doesn't mean peace. Sometimes, it means we've stopped believing anyone's listening. I canceled your grocery delivery, yes. You'll be fine. You've made it clear you've lived through worse. Just don't expect me to pretend that years of passive judgment didn't leave a mark. I sealed the letters, mailed them from the little post office 2 towns over. And that was it. I didn't wait for replies. I didn't stalk their social media. I let it go. 3 weeks passed. I got one letter back. It was from Tyler, written in pencil. Messy. On lined notebook paper torn from a school binder. "Uncle Sam, I'm sorry. Dad told me to say that, but I wanted to say it for real too. I didn't mean it when I said that stuff. I was trying to be funny. Everyone was laughing, and I thought if I didn't go along with it, they'd make fun of me. I played the PS5. I couldn't enjoy it. It made me think of you. I guess I thought you'd always be around. I miss you. Love, Tyler? That one? That one, I answered. Because sometimes the cycle can break, but only when someone realizes they're inside it. I wrote back. I didn't make it long. I didn't make it emotional. I just told him that forgiveness takes more than words. It takes change. And if he was willing to prove it, then I'd be willing to talk again. Maybe meet up someday. The rest? I never heard from again. Not Mike. Not Carrie. Not Rachel. Not Grandma. And you know what? I'm okay with that. Because I finally learned what boundaries feel like. Not walls. Just fences with locked gates. The kind you only open when someone knocks respectfully. The money stayed in my account. The phone stayed quiet. The air around me stopped buzzing with anxiety, and for the first time in my adult life, I slept, really slept, without wondering if someone was going to call me the next day needing $500 or a place to crash or just one more favor. And maybe they'll spin it someday. Tell people I had a meltdown, that I lost it. Let them. Because the truth is simple. I didn't disappear. I just stopped letting them pretend I was never there.